Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Retro Warriors episode 265. Woo. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident old bastard, Chris Saturn.
Hello.
Saturn, we do have some housekeeping. I want to start by saying, as always, you can check the episode description for timestamps to jump to the topic at hand if you don't want to listen to all the pre-show. Also, stay tuned after the credits. There are not credits. We don't have credits after the show because it's audio. It would just be, well, we do have credits once a month when we have our patrons.
That's true.
But the ending theme, I always want to say credits, like it's a TV show. The ending theme, because our producer Guy is going to be on for a special segment that is not after hours, which is what he normally does.
It'll actually be topic relevant.
It will for the first time.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know exactly when this episode's going to go up, but we should
go
announce
up on August 17th.
Okay. I do want to say that we have a mailbag episode coming up. So if you would like to send us questions that we're going to read on our mailbag episode, you can send them to retrowarriorspodcast@gmail.com, and we will potentially read your question on our big mailbag episode. Hopefully big mailbag episode. Currently kind of medium-sized mailbag episode, but hopefully big mailbag.
We're giving it some time. People have time to submit stuff if they want to submit stuff, so we can hopefully get that going.
So retrowarriorspodcast@gmail.com. I'm going to try to remember to put that in the topic or the show description.
Yeah, you can also find it on our various social medias, I believe, if you need to have it written down or presented to you.
Yeah. Anyway, so please do write in your preferably video game related question.
Right. So yeah, the idea is it's going to be questions video game related or retro gaming related or show related that might not be enough to actually fill an episode. So if it's like hey, which pinball based game do you guys really like? There's no way we could fill an episode on pinball games.
Right.
But we could.
Who's the best bad dude? Yeah. Which one? You know.
It's a guy.
The answer
Contra.
is me. I'm a bad enough dude. I've established this. So I did just want to put those things out there.
Indeed.
So that people can start writing in. Yes. My week, I have I spent some time disassembling my broken Dreamcast.
Poor broken
and
Dreamcast.
Taking the shell from it and putting it on my not broken Dreamcast.
Yeah.
It took a long time. I did the whole thing. I set it up, and then I remembered what a pain in the ass it is to burn Dreamcast games.
Right.
And then I promptly downloaded a bunch of Dreamcast games that were not in the compressed format that is required to burn them, because people may not know that Dreamcast discs are slightly larger than regular CDs, so you have to compress the game to fit on a CD-ROM to burn a game for your Dreamcast. Anyway, all this to say, I put a bunch of time and effort and work into getting my Dreamcast back up and running to play video games on, and then I promptly just emulated all of it on my PC.
Nice.
I'm using Redream, and it runs wonderfully, and it basically maps 1-to-1 to an Xbox One controller.
Which is essentially just an upgraded Dreamcast controller anyway.
Yeah, I don't think Microsoft would like you saying that, but it pretty much is.
Even when the original Xbox came out, everybody was saying, oh, this is just the next step of the Dreamcast controller. Did Sega basically design this for you guys? And nobody at Microsoft was saying no. So,
I've been playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in Redream.
Nice.
How many
of the characters have you unlocked now?
I have all of them unlocked.
Yay.
Because Redream supports cheats.
Oh, nice.
Which is the best. So I have everything unlocked. Nice. Which is great. And I've been playing it because we did our episode on the Marvel vs. games a long time ago now.
Back.
Many, many moons.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed doing that episode. I enjoyed a lot of those games. Very much enjoyed a lot of them. And to date, I still have not really particularly enjoyed Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And I was trying to rectify that. I was in a fighting game mood, so I was like, well, I will fire this up, and I'll put some real genuine time into to learning it and understanding it and practicing and playing and learning some characters and enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I put several hours in, and I still don't like it.
Aww.
I wish I liked it. I try to like it. I like everything except for playing the game.
I love that game so much. I love its soundtrack. I love the visuals. I especially love that some of the characters are lower resolution than other characters. That's hilarious to me.
Yeah. Well, and what confuses me is I like the first game, Marvel vs. Capcom.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. Marvel vs. Capcom 3, I've played a lot of. I really like Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
I don't like that one as much.
But for some reason, I don't like 2. And I think it might be that I didn't really ever put more than maybe an hour or 2 total into MVC2 until long after I had played many, many dozens of hours of MVC3.
Possibly.
So I wonder if maybe because I started after it, because I had the game growing up. I still have my copy we had growing up, but it was my brother's, because the Dreamcast was my brother's.
Right.
So if I was going to play the game, he was going to be in the room. And if he was in the room, he was going to be playing against me. If he was playing against me, I was going to lose instantaneously, and it was going to be sad and shameful.
Yeah.
So I played very little of it. And so I wonder if there's some like design element that I'm not picking up on that I'm, you know what I mean? It's not translating backward, I think is what's happening.
Yeah, I have a hard time playing 3 just because the different button layout, like having just 3 consecutive power buttons that are either punch or kick, and then that extra button that I have no idea when to use or how to use it or what to use it for.
It's the launcher button.
Yeah, I don't.
I think they call it special, but it's your launcher.
Essentially,
move, so you don't,
but I played
so you don't
so
have to
much
combo into it.
Right. I played so much of MVC 1 and 2 that's just so not intuitive to me. So MVC 2 feels natural to me still. So I still will go back to that one of the 3 of them.
I've also put about 2 dozen hours into Nier Automata that I picked up I got it on Games Billet for like $19.
And you're on you're already on the second act, right?
I'm on my second playthrough of it, and it's I have kind of fallen out of it because now I'm just kind of repeating stuff and it's a little less compelling.
Right.
I will probably sit down and fire through another good chunk of it at some point in time, but very, very much enjoyed that game. Honestly, even if I don't go back to it or get any more endings or put more effort into it, like I paid $20, I've gotten a good 20 hours worth of enjoyment out of it, and it was a really fun game.
Yeah, you're coming up on the end of the repetition. Because when you get to about the equivalent of 2/3 of the way through the first scenario, things get pretty drastically different, and you start to see things from a very different perspective. And then once you've caught up to the present, there's a whole other half of the game that you have to play through. So it really does open up, which is nice. But yeah, there is that period where it's just a lot of rehashing, and you start to wonder where it's going.
Yeah, but I've had a very good time with it. Highly recommend the game. I was on the fence for so long, even though everyone universally recommended it, basically, because there are so many on paper elements of the game that I do not like.
Right.
Like staring at a naked person's naked butt for like basically the first 20 hours.
Right.
No, I'm not usually super into that.
Yeah.
Really kind of bleak, depressing storyline. Also not usually super into
Oh man,
that.
you haven't even gotten to the depressing parts yet.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know. Having to replay certain parts of the game multiple times. I super am not into that. So like on paper, there's a lot of stuff this game does that I'm like, no, I don't like that. But it's just so much goddamn fun to play. The moment to moment gameplay is so much fun that I don't even care.
Also, the bosses are really neat.
The bosses are cool. It does get a little too anime-y for me at times, but it's even then it's still pretty benign by the wider standard.
Right.
We'll put it that way. But yeah, highly recommend that game, and it looks like you can pick it up pretty regular for $20. I just saw it for $17.99 like 2 days ago.
Yeah, the PC version regularly goes on sale for that. The console versions not as often, but it happens.
Yeah, PC version, if you're going to play it, there is a mod you need to get. It's called the FAR mod, and it fixes the fact that the game doesn't do widescreen right. It like letterboxes itself for some dumb reason. Like bars on the side, like the opposite of letterboxing. What is it? Pillar boxing? Yeah. It pillar boxes itself for no reason and squishes the whole game in there.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, but it is a PC port of a Japanese game, so I don't know what I expected.
Right.
Because for whatever reason, Japanese developers have the hardest time with PC ports.
Yeah, some of them are
You
getting
think
better,
it'd be the easier one,
right? Some Japanese developers are getting a lot better at it.
That's true, and I've played some of the Yakuza games on PC,
Yeah.
and those have just been stellar.
Right.
I was gonna say Sega makes pretty good PC ports,
Sometimes.
but no, they don't, because I own a lot of the Sonic games that literally just don't function on
Yeah.
PC.
Falcom used to make excellent PC games when that was their primary market, and then they started making primarily console games, and their PC ports got really shitty.
They forgot.
Yeah,
They forgot how
they
to do
forgot
it.
how to do it. Well, they outsourced it to a Chinese company at that point.
Oh, is that what it
Stopped
was?
doing it themselves.
Anyway, that's about all I've been
yeah.
up to.
So I got my RGB to BNC adapter. So that,
For your PVM.
yes, for the PVM that I got from you. So now I can plug my EuroSCART RGB cables directly to the TV, and holy shit, I was not prepared for that. So I plugged in my TurboGrafx that was modded to RGB, and I just expected it to look like, a really clean picture of a TurboGrafx.
Good. Yeah.
I expected it to be, nearly pixel perfect or exactly pixel perfect, maybe. Look basically like an emulator. What I didn't expect was how bright and colorful it was going to be. Like that
Oh, yeah.
completely took me off guard. It is absolutely gorgeous. And every time I sit down to play something on it, it just looks amazing. Right now, I only have the cables for my Turbo and my Super NES. I thought maybe it's just that the PVM itself is just because it's a CRT. Maybe it's brighter and just a better quality picture. So I plugged my NES into it to try to play some Dragon Quest IV, and it looked like butt through just standard RCA cables.
Right.
I was like, no, it was not that. That was not the answer. So, but no, it's a gorgeous picture, and I wish there was some way I could record it to upload it for others to see, but scan lines and cameras just don't cooperate.
No, they don't. You can fight with it long enough and get a couple seconds worth of video, but that's about it. And even then, it never really does it.
And even then,
justice.
you're just transferring it to a different screen that won't look the same. So,
Unless that little electron gun is shooting directly into your real eyeballs, it's hard to really quantify.
Yeah.
For sure.
Also, I had a scare with my Raspberry Pi. I was playing. Oh, what was I playing? Something dumb.
A game?
I was playing. Oh no, I was playing Super Mario Advance on it.
Yeah.
The Super Mario 2 port to Game Boy Advance.
Great game.
Yeah, great game. And I got to
Looks terrible on emulators because they cranked the contrast way too high on it because
looks like shit.
GBA wasn't backlit.
Plus, I forgot all the obnoxious voices in it.
Oh yeah.
So like the whole time,
Toad.
yeah, that's who I always play as, is Toad. So like I'm just like trying to play some Mario 2, and I hear that's what I needed. And,
they really fucking love. We're going to talk more about GBA voice later this episode, I'm sure. But they really fucking loved adding voices to GBA
I don't
games.
Get it. But yeah, so I finished the Birdo fight at the end of the very, very first level, at the very beginning of the game, and my Pi just locked up, and I didn't know what was going on. And so I just turned it off and turned it back on, and I was getting no video at all, like nothing. And I thought maybe my Pi was dead. So I went and grabbed one of the other mini Raspberry Pis I have sitting around doing nothing. And I just moved my SD card into it, and that also...
I like to imagine you went and like pulled one out from under your like uneven kitchen table leg,
Right,
like,
yeah, that's where I keep them. They just
I guess
prop
I'll
the
use a
table up.
matchbook for this.
But yeah, so I popped my SD card into the other Pi, and still no video. So I gave up. I ordered a new SD card because I thought just that one was dead. Reinstalled RetroPie, started to reinstall some of my settings and themes and stuff like that. Plugged that SD card into one of my Linux machines, and it was able to read everything off of there. So I grabbed all the ROMs, put it on the new SD card, was still configuring it, and then just for fun, I popped that SD card back into another Raspberry Pi, and it just powered up fine. I have no idea what the hell is wrong with this SD card. But every now and then it just won't work anymore. So I'm still preparing that other one as a backup. But man, I don't want to lose all that configuration. Holy shit, I put so much time into that.
Definitely back that up.
Yeah.
I've actually over-configured my Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
To the point that when I use it now, I don't even know where the fuck anything is because I didn't document the weird custom configs that I wrote for all this shit.
Yeah, I didn't go that far.
No, I've written controller configs for every single system on my Pi.
Yeah, I didn't do that. I did, however, write manual metadata for hundreds of games. that are not recognized by scrapers. So it's and also found or made custom box art for a bunch of games. So I don't want to lose any of that. Other than that, I was messing around with some Super NES Online. I was playing some more Panel to Pawn with some people from our Discord, as well as just playing around with some other games, including our game that we're covering this week. I played through it again on there because apparently I have to play through that game every week lately. And also, speaking of online play, you and I were playing some Street Fighter and Marvel Cap 3 over the internet.
Yeah. I had a good time doing that. Yeah. It's funny. I was playing Street Fighter with you, and you're better at fighting games than I am, or at the very least, Capcom developed fighting games.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
But we were playing, and I was like, "Hey, I'm actually doing okay," because I've been practicing fighting games,
nice.
in the last year or so. And I was like, "Hey, I'm doing okay," I'm not just totally getting stomped into the dirt.
Right.
I'm winning every once in a while. And then I went to just play more Street Fighter games, and I forgot how fucking unfair the arcade ROMs are.
Oh yeah, that's.
And I was like, "This is horrible."
Right?
No wonder people said you should play with friends.
Yeah, and I've always said I'm mediocre at best at those games, probably not good. And you've always given me hell and said that I was much better than I give myself credit for. I try to play the arcade, and I can barely get through 3 or 4 people, so I don't feel like I'm very
anyone could
good.
beat the arcade. It's just
I know people that could beat the arcade version. I'm not one of them.
They're called cheaters, Saturn. Okay.
Yeah, also we played some Smash Brothers, and the online worked great. I don't know why everybody complains about it. It was just fine for us. We even had Andrew in there.
Some games. Yeah, and Andrew was asking if we wanted to play Mario Kart, and I was like, yeah, I'm kind of over Mario Kart. I know that I hear it's terrible, but do you guys want to try Smash? Just on a whim, and we did, and it worked great. Like, I think I literally saw one single spot of lag for less than 1 second one time in 20 matches, 30 matches.
I didn't even notice that. So maybe it was because I was hosting and so it didn't show it on my end or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo was still using Direct Connect so that I was hosting the entire fucking game.
It's just the GameSpy network. They just took the whole thing.
Yeah. Using the Berserk network.
I mean, I'm sure that for competitive Smash players, it's trash garbage because whatever.
But we're not competitive
for
players.
us, we didn't even if I didn't know that I was playing online,
right.
I would not have guessed it.
Yeah.
At no point except for that one, and it was literally such a small, just one little rubber band. My character moved 2 extra frames, and I was like, that was weird.
Yeah.
If I wouldn't have known at all. Honestly,
yeah, it was pretty solid. Again, maybe for competitive players it's not great, but for people who just want to throw Pokeballs at each other, it's a good time.
Yeah. Let's get into some news.
Yeah.
First up, X-Play is being revived by G4 in 2021.
Weird.
Those are words I've not said in so long. G4 is a thing still? I thought they died. Apparently, they're a thing.
Yeah.
And X-Play's coming back. Adam Sessler had no fucking idea, according to his Twitter. So I don't know who they have hosting it. I know there are some people signed on to come back to G4. Kevin Pereira is one of them. Basically, for people that don't know, there was a TV channel that was called Tech TV, and it was Tech TV before YouTube and stuff was around and before it was prevalent.
Right.
This is where you watched technology stuff on TV before all of the TV was technology stuff.
Right.
And it turned into G4, specifically a gaming channel.
Well,
and when they did
G4 and Tech TV were completely different channels. And
do what?
Tech TV and G4 were different channels, and they merged.
Originally, yeah. And I mean, eventually, Tech TV was gone. G4 took its place.
Right.
And I never signed on for the G4 era. I was a big Tech TV guy, and I didn't
have Tech TV, but we had G4, and I watched quite a bit of that. And then once they merged with Tech TV, all their production quality and all their shows went to trash.
Yeah,
and I stopped watching any of it.
I feel like a lot of people remember G4 the same way they remember Nintendo Power.
Right.
Which is that they don't remember how bad it really was because it was all we had. So, of course, we liked it.
Right.
And as someone who owns and still regularly reads old issues of Nintendo Power, let me tell you, listeners, it sucks. But if I didn't have the internet or anything else to do, and I couldn't go to the video rental store for a couple days, it would suffice. You know, I feel like we forget.
According to the press release, G4 is being revived, but no word if it's going to be a TV channel or anything. It might just be like an online network.
I mean, it's 2020. They don't make TV channels anymore,
They do.
they? Right?
Yeah.
Like they don't. No, they don't. Saturn.
They fairly
Don't
recently
lie
made the
to me.
Paramount channel.
Oh, did you get that in your AARP newsletter this month?
Yes. No, my favorite show on G4 way back in the day was I'm trying to remember what it was called. I think it was called Icons, and it was just like documentaries about either game companies or game developers, and it was excellent.
Yeah.
And it was immediately canceled as soon as they merged with Tech TV. There was also a show that I used to watch. I think it was called Arena. That was it was Will Wheaton and some comedian guy named Travis Oates, just doing commentary over first person shooters. They would just watch tournaments and make fun of the players, and it was beautiful.
Long before live streaming was.
Oh yeah, this was in
a twinkle in the internet's eye.
like 2000, 2001, something like that.
Will Wheaton, to credit Will Wheaton, he's been ahead of the game on a lot of entertainment stuff.
Oh yeah.
Almost across the board, too ahead of the game, such that he's exiting something right as it's getting big.
Right.
And he continues to do that. So poor Will Wheaton. He just couldn't get over his Wesley Crusher curse. Anyway, hackers have discovered a native PS1 emulator for PS4 in the game Medieval.
Yeah.
I assume it was in there because they were going to put the old Medieval games in the
I think
new
the
game
old game is playable,
Is that what
or
it
it's
is?
unlockable or something, and they just discovered it's a full-blown PS1 emulator.
Yeah. More Nintendo leaks from IQ, including partial data and source code from Mario 64, Star Fox 64, and some data from both N64 Zelda games. And despite what the internet seemed to run with, there is not any evidence of Luigi in Mario 64. Right. What there is, however, is a character model from an early build that may indicate that there were at some point plans to include Luigi.
Right, but there's no,
of course,
there's no indication he's in the final build, and there's certainly no indication that he's playable in any way in the final build.
Right, which goes against everything the, in air quotes, gaming news, which they now get air quotes every time I say gaming news, because they report shit like this and they say things like, Luigi playable in Mario 64, he was there the whole time.
Yeah.
He wasn't there the whole time, you guys. Fucking read.
Right.
Pokemon fan site Glitch City shutting down due to fear of contamination from Nintendo leaks. This was a fear that we expressed,
right?
If not last episode, then the episode before, that this, or actually I might have even expressed it in Discord, and now I'm just conflating the two. But the amount of leaks coming out, as much as people are excited for it to improve things like emulation, it could actually have the opposite effect on a lot of projects where it becomes too hard to resist and too hard to stop contamination because, again, people working on things like emulators cannot even look at this stuff or they could get shut down.
Yeah, personally, I'm only interested in this stuff for the preservation aspect, being able to see how things were developed or whatever. But it's definitely going to get in the way of a lot of projects.
Yeah. And then another leak also confirmed code for Wii Startup Disc, prototype Wii remotes, and Nintendo's Office floor plans.
Yeah. When you get to the Office floor plans, it stops being a preservation thing and starts to feel like espionage. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's a little creepy.
Yeah.
Kojima and Junji Ito may be working on a horror game or not, or they were just talking, or who knows, maybe.
The most frustrating part is any time that the two of them talk or that Kojima ever hints at something horror
or they like tweet near each other.
Right. Immediately the internet is like, new Silent Hill? Like, fucking no. It has nothing to do with Silent Hill. Stop it. Stop doing that, internet.
You can keep getting mad about that and Mother 3, but they're going to keep doing it Saturday.
I know.
Minecraft modders have added VirtualBox support so that you can run virtual machines inside of Minecraft. What the fuck?
Yeah, they had a Windows 95 machine running so that your Minecraft dude could play Doom.
Great.
Yep.
Analog finally released final details about the Analog Pocket, including a pre-order date, and that date has passed, and pre-orders sold out in less than 15 minutes.
Oh,
now,
boy.
they have come out since and said that they are going, that basically what they came out and said is, hey, pandemic, global production is slow, we have limited units,
Right.
and they indicated that they were going to do another round.
Right.
I assume after they get the manufacturing nailed down. It's
Sure.
still 10 months out from release.
Right.
But it did happen. Also, the dock is $100.
Yeah,
as I predicted.
Yeah, the unit is $199.
$199, which is, I will say this, in the realm of backlit GBAs, $199 for the Analog Pocket is a very competitive price.
Especially with how high resolution the screen is.
Yeah, it's a 4K screen, and it presumably does other things.
Yeah.
Because an AGS 101, just straight stock AGS 101 GBA in good condition is
Right.
going to run you about $150 to begin with.
And with that screen, because of how high resolution it is, it can accurately show the exact pixel density of any of the systems that it's playing, essentially.
Right.
So that they look authentic to how they would have on their original system.
Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War has allegedly been leaked by a Doritos marketing campaign.
I don't care about that game at all, but that's one of my favorite headlines the last few weeks.
I don't give a fuck about Doritos until they bring back Doritos 3D Blast. Bring it
I
back.
thought they were just Doritos 3D.
Whatever they are.
Because
I
3D
need them
Blast
in
is
my
a
life.
Sonic game.
I want Doritos Sonic 3D Blast, Saturn.
You want
That's all I
Sonic
want
to
in my
blast
life.
3D Doritos into your life.
I'd pay so much money. I would devastate my financial situation for that. PS5 may have swappable faceplates.
Oh, boy.
We don't know.
Yeah.
New Animal Crossing update has fireworks added to the game.
There was other stuff too. I just didn't look at what it is because I don't play Animal Crossing.
They have also recently added swimming, although I think we covered that, but I haven't played the game in at least a month, probably longer. I'm
Yeah,
on
there was
hiatus.
another major update, is what they called it.
Yeah, the second summer update, I
Yeah.
think is what it was. Cuphead was announced and subsequently released for the PlayStation 4.
Nice.
Japanese PSP owners are noticing batteries swelling beyond use, meaning that most early PSP batteries have reached the end of their useful life. They do have shelf life,
Yep.
and it's running out.
And we're going to start seeing that with a lot of retro systems with rechargeable batteries. GBA SPs are going to start having that issue.
Thankfully, rechargeable batteries for these systems are still very easy to come by.
Right. But
which
they
is
are of
nice.
questionable quality.
Poll from NCV says over 50% of gamers intend to buy a next-gen console within 3 months of launch, with 84% choosing the PlayStation 5.
I have a hard time believing any of that poll.
I also have a hard time believing any of that.
I want to know what their polling methods were and what their sample size was.
I suspect that they polled people who self-identified as gamers, thus dramatically narrowing their view. Because if I was in a mall or something and someone's like, hey, we're doing a survey, would you identify yourself as a gamer? I would be like, no, please don't talk to me. Goodbye.
Right? Yeah.
New Steam rules will make it harder to purchase games from different regions via VPNs, I assume to keep publishers happy.
Right.
Because that's all the game industry wants, is for publishers to be happy and profitable and just keep fucking us, whatever you want to do.
You know, I never
Thanks,
even
Thank you.
never even realized that was an option, and now I feel like a chump for never having taken advantage of it.
There are so many Steam alternative sites
Right.
that I just go to isthereanydeal.com
Right,
and
right.
just fucking find it there
Yeah.
and call it a day. Animal Crossing director deletes her Twitter account after receiving numerous critical messages. And I do want to say this. I am always against harassment
Right.
because it's called harassment because it's harassment.
Yes.
Don't harass people.
Right.
But the article I read showed some of the tweets, and every single tweet they showed was just saying things like, hey, why can't I back up my game to the cloud or save it anywhere? This is super archaic and backward. You need to fix this right now.
How
like
dare you
6
harass
months
that
ago.
poor woman?
And so I don't want to say there wasn't harassment going on. I'm sure there was because it's the internet. But she's also the director of Animal Crossing. She is the person you should be tweeting to complain about lack of features in the game. Like that's exactly her job.
Right.
She's the director. She should be receiving that criticism.
Yeah.
So to anyone that harassed that person, fuck you.
Right.
But at the same time, I that article only every tweet they had was just like, please add cloud saves, please, I'm gonna lose my data.
Yeah.
But then the headlines made it sound so much worse.
Yeah.
So I don't
darker
know.
than it was.
Maybe they just couldn't find the bad tweets. I'm sure
Right.
there were some. And then finally, port of Japanese cult classic anti-RPG Moon is releasing on Switch on August 27th, which is 7 days after Battletoads Saturn. So I don't know how they expect to have any sales because Battletoads is coming out on the 20th.
But who's gonna buy Battletoads when it's on Game Pass?
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true. But I'm going to spend all my money on Game Pass, years of Game Pass, so I can always have Battletoads.
There you go. Perfect.
I know nothing about Moon, but I'm intrigued.
Me too.
So I might pick it up.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get into the topic at hand. This week we are talking The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past.
Game
You might have heard of it.
Heard of.
It was on the Super Nintendo,
Yes.
and it was a game.
That's all of it. Thanks for listening.
So, you want to give us the synopsis for Link to the Past, which sounds so silly to even ask someone like.
And so it's the third Zelda game, and it tells what they originally said was the origin story, and they have now said is the story of Link, which they have now said is a Link, who saved Zelda, which they've now specified as just a Zelda from Ganon, or maybe a Ganon. I don't know if that's the same Ganon each time. And it happened sometime before the events of the first game, laid the gameplay the gameplay framework that the series would follow for the next 2.5 decades or so.
Right. And of course, it's a game where you explore dungeons that give you tools that help you explore different parts of the world that were previously blocked off.
Right.
So it's a Metroidvania, basically.
It's basically a Souls-like.
Yeah, it's with Souls-like elements.
Right.
Because when you die, you're sent back a little bit.
Yeah, how dare they.
It's pretty much proto Dark Souls is what we're talking here. I hope there's going to be one listener that had no idea what the game was, and they're like, "Oh, this sounds fun." And they'd be like, "This is not any of those." Let's get through some listener feedback. As you can probably guess, we had a good amount.
Yeah.
So if your message was dramatically edited, I'm sorry, it was cut for time.
Right.
First up, Elk Neodafs says, a friend and I decided to play Link to the Past on Super Nintendo on Switch online. It's an old favorite of mine and something that is new to her. Using the Pass the Controller feature, we took turns clearing areas in each dungeon.
Nice.
And during the week, I would do the overworld grunt work so we could wreck dungeons on Sunday nights. Nice. We still haven't finished it, but it's the game we always go back to. So CT, if you're listening, we have an ice palace to conquer. Nice. Good fucking luck there. TamChan87 says, it wasn't until I traded my original GBA for a GBA SP that I got deep into Link to the Past. It was going okay. I'm not gelling with it too well, but I'm progressing. At some point, I get this mirror that teleports me to an alternate dimension and makes me a defenseless pink bunny. I could not get past that bit, and with Golden Sun within arm's reach asking for a third playthrough of the first Golden Sun, I just could not be arsed. One day I will return to Hyrule and get past the horrible pink bunny section one day.
It's like one screen.
I'll echo that whenever I was playing it growing up, I could not figure out what to do there. I would get stuck there almost every time. Wake911 says, probably in the minority here, but I'll always be on the Zelda 1 side more than Link to the Past. Fair. I never had it on my SNES, so I played it on emulation. Many years later, my friends weren't big Zelda fans either, and I've still never beaten it. I think the farthest I've made it is about halfway. I try to play it every year, but get bored and stop after a little while. Cool Handstand Man says, I eventually bought an SNES when they were $99 and I rented Link to the Past. I played through about a third of the game in a weekend, but did not return to it until this past year. It jump-started my interest in the series, and I have beaten Link's Awakening, Minish Cap, and Minish Cap in the past few months. I just got a Switch and I'm excited for Breath of the Wild, and I'm hoping to revisit Ocarina and Majora's Mask in the near future. The game itself is in the upper echelon of the 1985 to 2000 era. That's a big era.
Right? It's a huge era.
Rygar Starkong says, I will never forget the feeling that came over me when I first played Link to the Past, especially my first visit to Kakariko Village. There was just something about the music that really moved me. Right. As a matter of fact, I was so moved that I immediately started learning to play it on the piano. What a magical experience this game was. I believe that I often chase the dragon of trying to recreate the feeling of playing Link to the Past for the first time.
I get that feel.
Rob Eat says, my dad got this for me when it came out because I only had an SNES at his house. I remember it took me years to beat back then, pardon me, because of this one stupid block you had to move in Mystery Mire, I think. I recently replayed it on Switch Online, and it was amazing how going through the mazes in the dark, my muscle memory kicked in all these years later, and I walk right through them like I've been doing it since I was 7.
Nice.
And finally, Talencito says, Link to the Past was the first in the series that I played all the way through on my own. For an 8-year-old that grew up on Atari 2600, this game expanded what I thought could even be possible. I still replay it every so often like a schoolboy studying for a test.
Right.
I'm the gamer I am today because of how the light world suckered me in, and then the dark world smacked me around a bit and offered a challenge. Saturn, you want to give us release info?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, it's Link to the Past internationally. In Japan, it was The Legend of Zelda Triforce of the Gods. Released in Japan November 21st, 91. North America, April 13th, 92. PAL regions, 24th of September, 92.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I would have been April 1992.
Yes, sir.
I was 3.
I turned 10 that year, so I was definitely in the key demographic for it.
Oh yeah, that like 8 to 12 range,
Yeah.
I feel was like critical for Link to the
Oh, yeah.
Past. I as far as first encounters, I definitely grew up with this game, and I actually have very few memories of life before we owned a copy of Link to the Past.
Right.
I do remember the Zelda 1 and 2 era, and back then I always kind of preferred the first 2 games.
How dare you?
Yes, Zelda 2. I preferred Zelda 2 to Link to the Past when I was a kid.
Huh.
But my brother was super heavy into Link to the Past, so I've seen him beat it at least a dozen times, probably more.
What kind of medications were you eventually put on so you could get past that?
Well, it was mostly by virtue of being very young,
Right.
and Zelda 1 and 2 were just easier for me to parse.
Right. There's a lot more just
they-
basic action in both of those.
Yeah, they weren't easier games.
Right.
If anything, I'd say they're probably harder
Right.
games.
Yeah, they're certainly less forgiving games.
but they were just smaller in scope. The
A lot easier to
the
pick up and play.
overworlds- Yeah, the overworlds were easier to traverse, and I played them more. I liked them more, and for years I maintained that I liked the NES in general way more than the Super NES until probably
Like 2
my
years ago?
20s. Yeah, well, no, till probably about a decade ago.
Yeah.
And I'm just now in recent years really coming around the Super Nintendo.
Which is good.
So yeah.
'Cause the Super
I
Nintendo is
enjoy
excellent.
it. I still think I prefer the GBA as far as video game consoles go. But yeah, I'm coming around on it.
Yeah. So for me, I had seen it in Nintendo Power and, of course, other magazines since the Super NES really was rumored, but definitely since the release of the Super NES. And it was absolutely the most anticipated game in our household when it was coming up. I was saving up money. My mom was making sure we had money set aside for it. So when it did come out, it was within a couple of weeks of when it released that we were able to get a copy. And I probably played through it dozens of times just in the first year or two after it released. And I have certainly played it many, many times since then. It is up there on the list of games that I have played to completion the most in my life.
Yeah. I don't know. My brother was so into it, and I do remember he had a sealed, like in the shrink copy of it that he got like way late. Someone got it for him, and he just kept it because he kept those kinds of things. And he kept it until probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, and sold it for like, some insane amount of money, like
Right.
$150.
Sounds about right.
And I'm sure it's worth a lot more than that.
I would
now.
not be surprised at all.
But yeah, I do remember he had that sitting around for a long time,
Nice.
and then finally gave it up.
Probably one of the Player's Choice reprints.
Let's talk. Yeah, I think it might have been.
Yeah.
It had the Those had like a little badge on the box, right?
Yeah, it also had a weird texture behind the Zelda logo on the box, whereas the original was just a flat gold color.
That I don't remember. Tell me about development of Link to the Past.
So there is surprisingly little information about the development on the internet. I found a couple of interviews, though, an interview with Miyamoto anyway. So it was originally under development for the NES or the Famicom in 1988.
Good God.
And then they moved production to the Super NES or Super Famicom sometime in 1989. The game
I got a Super Nintendo so late that citing 80s dates for Super Nintendo stuff still sounds weird to me.
Well,
I don't think we got one until 94, 95 in my house.
Well, the console came out in 1990. So.
Right, I know, but it just still feels every time I hear like Super Nintendo and then the 80s, I'm like, that can't be right because I got a Super Nintendo when like the fucking PlayStation was out.
Yeah.
So
it's a little bit of a different era. It was one of the first Super NES games to use an 8 megabit or 1 megabyte ROM image, double that of most Super NES games at the time. And according to that interview that I read with Miyamoto, the development started with very, very few people, with most of the staff not added to the project until its final 8 months of development, which he said was standard for projects at Nintendo at the time, where they would start with very few people until they mostly had it all planned out, and then they would just bring in people to help flesh it out. There was some conflict among the staff as to whether the game should lean more towards RPG or action elements. And I feel like they split the difference a little bit, but they definitely leaned more towards action, and I feel like they made the right choice there. And some features were cut due to time or hardware limitations, and some of those wouldn't see implementation in the series until much, much later. One of the things that they said that they had started working on was being able to start a grass fire with the fire rod or the lamp, and it would just spread to other grass and bushes in the area. Miyamoto said that he thought that if they had another few months of development, they could have implemented things like that, but they were just coming down to the wire. That's
how unfortunate that they had to remove arson from the game.
That feature didn't show up until Four Swords Adventures, if I remember right. And then, of course, it was prominent in Breath of the Wild. You could use it to make a little updraft to bring your sail up.
Yeah. Let's talk story. The surprisingly robust story.
Yeah.
Maybe not surprising to later Zelda fans, but to me as a kid, it has a surprising amount of story.
It was surprising when it came out, too, because the first two games, it was basically one paragraph worth of story in the manual, and then just go to town. You're in Hyrule now.
Yeah. Go ahead and walk us through the story.
Okay, so you've got the King of Hyrule who went missing after he had hired an advisor who was the wizard Aghanim. And Link and his uncle are contacted telepathically in the middle of the night by Princess Zelda, who is being held in the dungeon of the castle by Aghanim. And she is the last of the maidens, which are descendants of the sages that sealed Ganon, and she is being abducted by Aghanim. Link and his uncle are the last surviving descendants of the Knights of Hyrule, and they are believed to be the only ones capable of saving the kingdom.
And they never say why.
No. Well,
there's never any indication.
Well, eventually somebody says why. But it's later.
Right.
So first,
well, I mean, they explain Link, but do they explain his uncle?
Yeah, they were both descendants of the Knights.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were the last.
If you can't tell, I've never followed the story in Link to the Past.
So Link's uncle dies pretty much immediately.
Instantaneously.
Yeah, to the weakest enemy in the game. And so Link takes on the role of hero. He rescues Zelda. He brings her through a secret passage to the sanctuary, where the loyal sage or priest agrees to keep her safe and tells Link about how all the maidens were abducted and how they can use their power to open the seal to the Dark World to allow Ganon to take over the world. He instructs Link to meet the Elder, who is Sahasrara. That's how I've always said it anyway. I don't know if that's right.
They just slammed on the keyboard.
Right, yeah.
They were like, quick, we have to ship it in 4 seconds. Name this guy. Slam, slam, slam.
His name is Brushfire. No, we can't use that one.
We took the arson out.
And Sahasrara tells Link about the Master Sword and how to awaken it by collecting 3 pendants: the pendants of courage, wisdom, and power.
Not Triforces.
No.
Courage, wisdom, and power.
No, that's much later in the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to go get those 3 pendants, and that will show your worth to the sword so that you can waken it up. Once you do get the sword, Link is again contacted telepathically and is told that the sanctuary is under attack. You get there and find the sage like dying on the ground, and Zelda's been kidnapped. And then you go to Hyrule Castle to face Aghanim, but you again get there too late, and you watch Aghanim banish Zelda to the Dark World, and you attack Aghanim and you win, but you also get banished to the Dark World. At which point you learn that the Dark World used to be the Golden Land and is the home of the Triforce, but the world takes the form of the wishes of whoever holds the power of the Triforce. And when a thief named Ganondorf entered the Golden Land and obtained the Triforce, it turned the Golden Land into the Dark World, and it turned Ganondorf into this pig beast Ganon. And so Link goes around the Dark World, saves all the maidens who have been trapped in crystals for some reason, and uses their power to unlock the tower so that he can defeat Aghanim and Ganon and reclaim the Triforce.
Saturn, they're trapped in crystals so they can show off the Mode 7.
That's true. Actually, no. The Mode 7, so far as I remember, is it is
just the map's Mode 7, isn't it?
The map is just about the only thing I can think of. I guess the crystal animation may be Mode 7.
It looks like it, but then in my head, I don't know that it ever shifts or moves.
Yeah. Well, I think it shrinks in.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be.
Also, the title screen has some Mode 7.
That's true. The rotating Triforce pieces.
There you go.
Perfect.
Let's talk gameplay.
Yeah.
So it is a departure from Zelda 2.
Right.
And
so return
it really
to form
just,
to Zelda 1.
Yeah, it really just feels like let's build on Zelda 1 and kind of forget Zelda 2. It's got the same overhead presentation and action-adventure gameplay.
It does have a little more precise swordplay, which I guess you could say is inspired by Zelda 2.
I feel like that is kind of a stretch.
There is a magic meter now, which was not in Zelda 1, but was in Zelda 2.
True. That's a fair point.
That's pretty much the one thing.
And you can work to increase your magic.
Yeah, there's a power glove. There was not a power glove in Zelda 1, but there was in Zelda 2.
Yeah. So I guess, some things.
Yeah.
And we have other returning features. You've still got the overworld and underworld dungeons that must be completed to get to the final dungeon.
Right.
Underworld dungeons still have harder enemies, puzzles, a map, compass, a special item that you have to obtain. But even then, the special item is a little bit different because in Zelda 1, you really didn't need to get the special item in every dungeon.
Yeah, there's a lot of them that were optional in the first game.
This one aren't.
Almost every one is required.
Most of the dungeon items mandatory? Yeah, I mean, aside from like glitches and stuff like that.
There's some of them that are not mandatory, but most of them are mandatory.
And then each dungeon concludes with a boss that gives you a piece of heart and a plot coupon.
Yeah, either
that you can go redeem at the nearest evil wizard.
Right.
Once you've got enough of them. Some areas of the overworld and parts of the underworld dungeons can only be explored after obtaining the items usually found in the underworld dungeons, which is something that we've come to expect from Zelda games, but didn't necessarily exist in this gated off form in prior Zelda games. I mean, there were some items that you needed to progress.
Yeah, there were some, like even in the first game, you had the raft and the ladder that without those you couldn't reach certain areas of the overworld.
Second game, you need the lantern,
The raft came back in Zelda 2 as well. You couldn't get to the whole eastern side of Hyrule without the raft.
True. But it didn't feel like such a big theme. There was just these couple points in the game, a small handful of points in the game where it's like, no, you need this thing.
Right.
The entire world is designed around your tool set.
Right. Yeah.
At
like
any given
in the
point
early games, it kind of felt like there were just doors in certain locations and your items would be the keys that would get through that one thing. Whereas in this one, it's more like a play box just filled with all these little puzzles that if you happen to use your tools right, you can go all kinds of places.
Right. And specifically that one nugget of design shift, I think is what I, for so many years, didn't enjoy about Link to the Past compared to Zelda 1 and 2, is that it makes the entire Link to the Past overworld kind of feels like a puzzle.
Yeah.
Or I guess a series of puzzles.
That's what I like the most about it.
Yeah, that I did not like. In fact, if I were to pinpoint a thing in Link to the Past that I like the least, and I'm phrasing it that way strategically so we don't get letters,
Right.
the thing that I like the least would be the overworld. I struggle with the overworld in Link to the Past. To this day, I struggle with it. It feels very closed in and claustrophobic to me. Especially Zelda 1 felt so much more open just because it had just more empty space. There's just less stuff in it.
Right.
But it feels a lot less open and more corridor-like
Right.
than Zelda 1 or 2 to me. And I don't like that. A lot of it, I would know where I needed to go, for example. Like, I need to get over here. I need to get to the village in the Dark World. And I'd have to remember, what path to take to get to it. I couldn't just look at the map and then walk that direction, then eventually end up there. It was very often more complicated than that.
I feel like I can usually just look at the map and go that direction. There's not as many roadblocks. Like in the Dark World, there's a handful, but even then they get opened up pretty early. Like once you have the hammer, you can pretty much get anywhere.
In my most recent playthrough, once I had all of the tools and had learned all of the Dark World shortcuts, things went faster, but they still, it felt cumbersome.
Right.
It never felt bad, but it felt like, I wish it was more open. You know what I mean? Like, it would be cool if this was more convenient, would be the biggest.
Of course, keep in mind,
closest to a complaint
the game
that I would
itself
reach.
came with a massive map of the game, too. So,
Also true.
So I was able to just look down real quick and be like, oh, that's the path I have to go. And so I never really felt lost back in the day.
And there are some sections of the map that aren't super well represented, where it seems like you can get through, like there's a path somewhere, but there's in reality not.
Right, there's a tree or something in the way.
Yeah, something where I'm plotting my path on the map, because unlike you, you've memorized the entire game
years ago.
I still have to look at the map a lot when I'm like, I need to get to that one place. How do I get there? All right, let me look at the map, and then I plot my path along the map, and I go that way, and I go, oh, this is blocked off, but that wasn't indicated on the map in a way that was obvious.
Well, I'm talking about the paper map that came with the game. That one was much more
right.
detailed.
I'm still using the in-game map. Moving on, while a sword can be used at all times for the most part and is given its own button, other items must be cycled between on another button and can be selected from a submenu, just like previous Zelda games.
Zelda 1.
There's no experience from battle, but defensive items and additional health can be gained in dungeons or by exploring the overworld. Right. You have quick travel that can be eventually unlocked through a kind of obtuse side quest. There are portals on the overworld.
People basically just tell you how to do that side quest if you talk to all the people.
Yeah, all you have to do is talk to every NPC in the game.
That's how every game worked back then.
I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying it's a little obtuse. Hidden rooms and dungeons can be found by interacting with the environment. You can bomb things. There's fire, and there's other tools to reveal hidden items both in the overworld and in the underworld. And some items can be purchased from shops, though it's less necessary than the first game, where things felt a little more disposable and probably dropped a little less frequently. Link to the Past is really good about giving you the item you need when you need it.
Also, in the first game, you have to buy arrows. You can't get around that. In this game, there's no item the only item you must purchase is the flippers, and it's not even from a shop.
As far as new features introduced in Link to the Past that have become foundational for every Zelda game since, with minor exception.
Right.
Breath of the Wild being an exception in a lot of these cases.
Right.
Link can swim with flippers. You can run with boots. You can pick up objects. You can jump from small ledges or fall into pits without just dying or getting hurt. They could lead you to a different level.
Right.
In addition to counters for rupees and bombs, there's a dedicated counter for arrows and a magic meter for some sub-items. Keys can no longer be taken between dungeons or purchased in stores and will only work in the dungeons in which they're found. And there is now a big key to open the big chest and
also
usually the boss door.
And that was a big change. Like the first time we were playing the game, we were desperate trying to find some spare keys somewhere before we finally realized they just don't transfer. And that was the thing. Like in the first Zelda game, I would avoid all locked doors in some dungeons just to have a cache of keys hanging out. And
that's one thing I like about Zelda 1 is that Link to the Past demands a specificity. You have to specifically, like, you need these keys for this thing. No, you can't fudge it. No, you can't grind it somewhere else. Like, you need to solve this puzzle
that
or
said,
you cannot progress.
It is more realistic because if you have a door that can just be opened up by whatever key somebody found on the other side of the world, you don't have a very good luck.
True, but if I were to, turn a critical eye toward it, again, it's reducing that openness a little bit that earlier Zelda games
it does make it a little more linear in the way that you have to solve a dungeon generally in the way that it's laid out. There's some exceptions, but for the most part you have to do things the way that they program them.
Right. Unlike the first game, almost every dungeon requires the special item at some point. Usually the way the dungeons progress is that you go through a portion of it and then you can make your way to the item in question. Then the item usually helps take you through the rest of the dungeon. Right. So it's a lot of going into a room, realizing, oh, I can't progress here. I need a thing. And then going and exploring more until you find said thing and then backtracking.
And a lot of the dungeons don't require the item until you get to the boss. Like up until that point, it was just like, oh, you happen to go get it. And I know that sounds so obvious to anyone who's played any Zelda game since then, but when Link to the Past came out, that was weird to think that I had to go find the item in the dungeon. Because in the first Zelda, most dungeons you could beat without ever even encountering where the item was. And a lot of the items didn't even come into play until 3 or 4 dungeons later, if at all. So having each one be more or less mandatory was a change. Whether or not it's a positive change is up to the opinion of the player, obviously. There are things that I like more about the non-linearity of Zelda 1, but it definitely adds more structure to the game and to the dungeon specifically.
It makes it feel more like a driven experience than Zelda 1 almost often feels like a sandbox.
Right.
Where you're just kind of playing around in there.
Much like Breath of the Wild.
It's also in that same vein of specific solutions to specific problems instead of general solutions to general problems. So it fits with the design philosophy of the rest of the game, for sure. And this one is a really big one. And one that I did not like for a long time. But dungeons are broken into multiple floors instead of everything being on the same level.
Right.
And you're often falling into pits and doing kind of multi-floor trickery.
Right.
Moving things and yourself around the floors in specific orders to solve puzzles. And for whatever reason, the whatever spatial recognition you need to do that, I'm not good at. I struggle hard with the dungeons in Link to the Past. I always have. And I like the very straightforward kind of hack and slash dungeon crawler nature of Zelda 1 as compared to Link to the Past dungeons myself.
As much as I love Zelda 1, I do far prefer the dungeon design of Link to the Past to the first game. Just because I like that there's a lot more thinking and puzzle solving. Even to the most basic elements of the dungeons have some puzzle solving. And for the most part, I love the multi-floor layout of most of the dungeons until you get to the Ice Palace.
And certainly I don't mean to imply that they're bad. They're extremely well-designed dungeons. Everything in the game is extremely well-designed. It just comes down to preference. And I don't know, we probably should have mentioned it in the scope at the beginning of the episode, but we're going to compare it a lot to Zelda 1.
What?
Because it's not fair to compare it to later Zelda games because they came out later.
And they all built off of this.
Yeah, before this, I mean, you've got Zelda 1 and 2.
And Newtopia.
And Newtopia. So that's kind of it. When was Link's Awakening? It was after Link to the Past, wasn't it?
Yeah,
by like a year?
Yeah,
a year later?
When Link's Awakening came out, a couple of years after this, if I remember right, The question in all the magazines was, do we call it Zelda Game Boy or do we call it Zelda 4? What is the name for it? And then everybody was like, well, you call it Link's Awakening. They're like, that's stupid. Nobody calls a game by its subtitle. Is it Zelda 4 or is it Zelda Boy?
Honestly, listening early in the show, we were talking about Link to the Past, either on air or not, and you said something Zelda 3.
Right.
And I immediately went, what the fuck is Zelda 3?
Every magazine called it Zelda 3 when it came out, and
which makes
years
sense.
afterwards.
It's the third Zelda.
Right.
Of course you call it Zelda 3. The other two were Zelda and Zelda 2.
Right.
And but hearing you call it Zelda 3, I was like, what the who calls it Zelda 3?
Right.
What?
And then
it was the weirdest.
Yeah, when Link's Awakening came out, everybody was like, well, do we give this one a number? And then when Ocarina of Time came out, that caused even more of a debate. All the magazines were like, is this Zelda 5 or 4? Where are we? Yeah. And then they just gave up, and just everyone referred to it by its subtitle.
Yeah. Heart containers can no longer be found in overworld locations and are instead replaced with heart pieces, and you need 4 pieces to form a heart container, and I do not like that.
Yeah, I'd just like to say for the record that no matter how much I love Link to the Past and so many of the other Zelda games, I hate heart pieces, and they can go to hell.
Well, because so many of them are behind such tough puzzles that you feel like you're putting forth a lot of effort, and especially if it's your first piece in a new container, you feel like you got nothing for it.
That's true.
And it feels like.
And also, there's always that point when you're getting to the end of the game when you're like 2 heart pieces shy of a perfect
and
health
you don't know
meter.
which ones you haven't gotten.
Yeah, and there's because it's 24 heart pieces in the game, you can't just like go check a couple places. No, you have to look through all 24 of them to figure out which one you missed, and that can be a pain.
And then of course, what I would say is probably the. I think it's safe to call this the biggest innovation of the game, is that you now have 2 overworlds. There's the light world and the dark world, which is it's 2 games in one.
Yeah.
Is basically
that's how they advertised it. Yeah.
The Dark World is a mirror image of the Light World with a few notable geographical changes. Lake Hylia is frozen over. The village is now the Village of Outcasts. The desert's now swamp. Just kind of changes like that.
Right.
Link can enter the Dark World via portals located in the overworld.
Most of them hidden.
And once in the Dark World, you take on the form of a bunny and cannot use any equipment until you get the Moon Pearl, and then you can go back and forth while still being regular Link.
Right.
But to return to the Light World, you can use a magic mirror given to you by an old man on Death Mountain, and the mirror can be used just about anywhere in the Dark World to immediately return to an equivalent Light World location. So what it turns into is it complicates the puzzles even more, because now you're dealing with puzzles where you're having to strategically portal back and forth using overworld portals and the magic mirror.
I love it so much. That's like my favorite part of the game right there.
Those were always my least favorite puzzles, because I would always like portal and then jump off a cliff and then couldn't get back to my magic portal, and then now crap, I have to run down to this thing and then go back up there and then do it again, and it becomes frustrating for me as someone who doesn't have the game memorized.
It's fair, yeah.
It's a lot of running back and forth to get, guess what, 1 piece of a heart.
Right. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend like there weren't many trial and error occasions where I learned, this is where it is safe to have a portal, and you were not to ever go this direction while your portal is still live, or you will lose it. It is years of trial and error, and again, it came out at that perfect age of my life where I had nothing but free time an entire summer to just play Link to the Past over and over again. So
and I don't mean to say again that they're poorly designed puzzles. To reiterate, the Light World, Dark World mechanic is the biggest innovation in this game. And when it came out, there was nothing else like it.
Also,
it was amazing and amazingly well done. Not just that it existed, but how well it interacted with each other. They weren't just 2 separate worlds you're teleporting to. They did interact with one another, and changes you would make in one would affect another one. And that's massive. That is a huge innovation.
And technologically, it was a neat innovation too, because from what I was reading anyway, both worlds are always loaded into memory at the same time.
Right.
So when you use the portal or the mirror, it just swaps the graphic elements and swaps you into the other world and loads in the relevant NPCs or monsters based on which world you're in. But they are both loaded when you transfer to each screen, which is really impressive for a Super NES game in the early 90s.
Oh yeah, it's impressive today.
Right?
It's still impressive. As someone who didn't beat the game until 2020, it is still impressive today.
Right.
The way it works and how well designed it is. And I do wonder, because we were talking about how specific the design of the game is. Everything is very. You need, not just keys for doors, but as an analogy, you always need the right key for the right door in Link to the Past. And so much of that seems to be because it is such a perfectly interlocking world that interlocks in so many different ways that they couldn't just have it be this random free-for-all where you're just buying 50 keys and storming dungeons and skipping items like that. For it to work, it has to have that very specific design driving it. Otherwise, it
and the whole
wouldn't have.
The whole design philosophy for the series from this point forward became that same thing, but even more laser focused. Like in Link to the Past, there's plenty of dungeons where you can end up with 4 keys on you at a given time, and you still don't know where exactly to go because there's 5 locked doors in front of you.
Right.
But even by the time you get to Ocarina, which is the next console game in the series anyway, there's already a pattern where if you get a key, you will immediately find a locked door, and you cannot progress to get another key until you have gone through that locked door. And it becomes even more linear as it goes forward.
Yeah. And I do wonder if maybe that's why I bounced off of Link to the Past for so long, is because later games I enjoyed more than Link to the Past at the time. And again, please don't send letters. I'm not saying they're better or more well designed. I just personally enjoyed them more.
Make sure you specify him in the letters you send, though, because I'm not saying any of that.
Because the later games, they're more linear, and they're very much like, here's an antechamber, solve this puzzle, then move to the next antechamber. And there are exceptions, in Ocarina, there's like the water temple that everyone complained about and whatever. But in Link to the Past, it feels like it's specific, but still just open enough that I get turned around really easy.
Yeah.
It's not constantly like it. There is one right answer and to this one right question, but they're not going to point you toward it.
But sometimes
you have to find it.
Sometimes there are more than one right answer in Link to the Past, but there's one obviously intended answer at all times, and they might not discount other answers that work, but if you do it that other way, you're probably going to have a more awkward time of getting it done.
Right. So they're not. It has that specific design, but they're not putting the answer in your face.
Right.
They're like, there's only one answer, but you got to find it. The later ones, they're like, there's only one answer, and you're locked in this room. Figure it out.
There's only one answer, and until you see eye to eye, you're not leaving.
You got to kill one specific bad guy, and we've locked you in a room with one specific bad guy. Figure it out.
Right.
Now we've reached the list portion of our show, where we're just going to read a big list of stuff.
Yeah. I assume we will discuss some of this if time permits.
I will just let you stop me if you hit a thing you want to talk about. So first we're going to go through the items in the game. You've got the sword, which is broken down into the master sword, the tempered sword.
Well, there's the sword and the master sword and the tempered sword.
Pardon me. The sword, the master sword, the tempered master sword, and then the golden sword.
Which we always called the butter sword.
It does look like butter.
Yes.
You have the shield and the fire shield and mirror shield. You have the lamp. You have the boomerang and magical boomerang, bombs. You have the mushroom and magic powder. Mushroom being the item that you give to the witch to turn into magic powder. And the magic powder is probably my favorite item in the game just because it does weird things.
It does do weird things. But most importantly, it turns anti-fairies into fairies, which can be such a huge life-saving moment in a lot of the dungeons.
You have bottles, medicine, and a bug-catching net.
Which you can use to catch bees or fairies or golden bees.
Mm-hmm. And I thought for years that you had to kill Aghanim with the bug-catching net.
No, that's a glitch.
I did not. We were on stream, and I said, because the bug net, you don't have to get the bug net. It's an optional item. and we were on stream, and I was playing the game, fighting Aghanim, the first battle with him, and I remember saying, how are you supposed to beat him if you don't get the bug net? The bug net's optional. And you and Guy were both like, what are you even talking about?
Well,
You don't need
I
the bug
immediately
net
equipped the
to
bug
beat
net
him.
at that point. I was like, I'm going to try to fight Aghanim with the bug net. I'm not good at fighting Aghanim with the bug net, but let's do it.
And then I realized that growing up, my brother knew that. I assume he read it in a magazine or something.
It was a Nintendo Power.
And he exclusively fought him with the bug net. So I just, my whole life have assumed, because I know that they tell you, they're like, you need some magical item to reflect his evil beams back.
Actually, they
and I thought it
explicitly
was,
say the Master Sword.
whatever. And so I for years I thought it was like, and there was a joke, like you kill the last boss with the bug net, the one thing you'd never expect. And I always like hailed it in my head. I'm like, what a great funny joke they included in this game.
Yeah.
Fuck, that's not the case.
No, it was a glitch that they decided to leave in. And in fact, they pay homage to it in Ocarina of Time because there's no bug catching net. Instead, you just catch fairies by waving a bottle at them. So when you do have that back and forth tennis fight with Ganondorf, and I want to say it's a Shadow Temple in Ocarina of Time, you can just pull out a bottle and just wave it at his energy, and it'll knock it back at him.
Yep. You have the bow and arrows and silver arrows.
Right.
You have the Pegasus boots, which this is their first
Oh
introduction.
man, I loved those. When I first got those, I was like, I can run in Zelda? What fucking world is this?
And thus began the standard, for many years, standard Zelda trope of nobody actually walks.
Right.
You either roll or use the boots to get everywhere.
You just sprint into walls and bounce off of them like an idiot.
You have the Book of Mudora, which is basically a plot widget so that you can read certain things.
Right.
You have the Power Glove and Titan's Mitt for lifting large and larger items.
Right.
Zora's Flippers, the magic mirror that moves you between worlds. The Moon Pearl that lets you keep your form between worlds. The Magic Hammer, which I don't really know what's magical about it. It's kind of just a hammer.
It's a hammer, but it's a badass hammer.
That hammers things
It does
into the ground.
It also does tempered sword damage well before you get the tempered sword, so it's an easy way to clear out enemies too.
You have the first appearance of the hook shot, which is
It was my favorite item when this game came out. I was like, holy shit, I can just like grapple myself across the room. This is the greatest thing in the world, and I would use it all the time. I learned all kinds of tricks about what enemies it instantly kills and rooms you could practically skip just by using it. It's amazing.
You have the ice and fire rods, which one of these is optional, isn't it?
No, you think
Neither
it's
is
optional. You can optionally get it at the very beginning of the game, but it's not needed until the boss of the second to last dungeon.
That sucks.
Yep.
You have the magic cape, which is probably my most used item.
Right.
It turns you invisible.
That one
lets you
is
walk over
optional.
spikes. But yeah, that I use that one a lot.
yeah.
You've got the shovel, the flute that calls your duck.
Yep.
You have the blue mail and red mail that reduce the damage you take. The cane of Birna, the cane of Samaria, which are fire and ice canes, respectively.
No, those are the rods that are fire and ice.
But what are the canes?
The cane of Birna is it puts a little magic barrier around you. It basically does the same thing as the cape, but without turning you invisible.
Did I just never use that
But
damn
it
thing?
also damages enemies, unlike the cape. So you can use the cane of Birna to just like walk through enemies and they'll all take damage while you're doing it. The cane of Samaria is one of the most useful and broken items in the game because
That's the one that makes blocks.
it
isn't
makes a little block that you can put on switches or whatever. But if you push the button again, it then splits the block into 4 fireballs that go in opposite directions of each other, and they can take out enemies pretty easily. And it's also a good way to attack enemies at a distance. And you can use it as a shield. You can just put a block in front of you, and enemies will just bounce off of it until it eventually dissolves. So it's
The cane of Samaria I used because you needed it for
a couple
puzzle,
of puzzles.
didn't you?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3
The other
puzzles.
cane I don't know that I used.
It's pretty handy, especially as a defensive item. I probably don't use it in most playthroughs, but there are times when it's useful. And if you've gotten it before the fight with Blind, which we'll get to in a minute, it does damage to that boss. So you can just use it as a defensive item and just stand there and let it attack the boss for you while you can't take damage. And if you have enough magic potions to keep your magic up the whole fight, you never even have to swing your sword.
Yeah. You have the magic medallions, I think only one of which is required.
2 are required.
two are required, which are Ether, Bombos, and Quake. They're basically screen-filling magical spells that hurt lots of things.
And Ether opens up the path to Misery Mire, and Quake opens the path to Turtle Rock.
Mm-hmm. As far as dungeons, we'll just fire through these. In the light world, you have the castle dungeon that you start in.
Right.
You have the Eastern Palace where you fight the Armos Knights.
Yep.
The Desert Palace where you fight Landmalus. And you have the Tower of Hera where you fight Moldorm, who sucks. And then you have the Castle Tower where you fight Aghanim.
Mm-hmm.
And then that brings you into the Dark World where you have the Palace of Darkness where you fight the Helmasaur King.
Which I only recently learned you could actually hurt with the hammer. For years, I thought that you had to drop a bomb, let him walk over it, and have it explode his mask from inside. Because that's how they showed it in the Zelda comic book and Nintendo Power.
That was another one that I just always hammered him the whole time, my whole life when I fight him.
Apparently, that's the intended method, is to just hammer him to death. But I saw it in the comic and Nintendo Power. I was like, well, I guess that's the correct way to do it. So I would just run through 20 bombs trying to get him to finally stand on one and lose his mask.
You have the Swamp Palace where you fight Argus, the Skull Woods where you fight Mothula, Thieves Town where you fight Blind, the Ice Palace where you fight Cold Stare, Misery Mire is Vitreous, Turtle Rock is Trinex, and then there's Ganon's Tower where you have a boss rush of Armos Knights, but they're on ice, Landmalus with a stone statue, Moldorm in a smaller arena so he knocks you off more, and then you fight Aghanim and his clones, and then eventually you come to the final boss, which is your standard Ganon battle.
Right.
This is also kind of the beginning of... In Zelda 1 had some sort of puzzly bosses, but it's really the beginning of Zelda being like, no, these bosses are also their own puzzles.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in the first Zelda, you had a couple of bosses like Goma could only be killed by arrows. Dodongo could only be killed by eating a bomb.
The bombs. Right. So it's there a little bit, but this one, it's like some of the bosses you can kind of cheese, but there is a puzzle-like answer to how to defeat each of them. Some of them, it's you have to do it more than others.
Right. Yeah. The thing is, a lot of them you can ignore that answer and still win. Like the Armos Knights forever, I thought you could only kill with arrows. But once you have, I know definitely once you have the Master Sword, I don't think it works with the Standard Sword, but if you have the Master Sword, so when you're fighting him in Ganon's Tower at the end, you can just kill him with spin slashes, and
you can also hurt him with bombs, can't you?
Possibly. I don't know that I've ever tried bombs on Armos Knights.
I feel like I've hurt him with bombs.
I believe that would probably do it. Landmalus, you can use any weapon. I've always used the sword because that's what that you expect to use that early in the game, but you can use the Ice Rod and take him out real quick if your aim is good. So there's a lot of them where you could use alternate strategies.
As far as sound and graphics, it looks great for an early SNES game. It looks great for a late SNES game. It looks great for a game in 2020. It's a good-looking game.
Oh, yeah.
It's got very big sprites. It's got interesting locales. The two overworlds combined to create a massive amount of playable space.
Oh, yeah.
It's very well animated.
Yeah.
I can't even... I know there was a couple of points of slowdown, but I can't even name them.
I can.
I feel like I experienced... Okay, go ahead then.
There's several points where there's just a ton of enemies on screen, or where there's conveyor belts and enemies, and the game will slow down a little bit.
Was Mothula a bunch? Was there slowdown in that boss fight?
Fuck Mothula. Fuck everything about Mothula.
Am I remembering that right?
Mothula is also glitched. If you go in there with the fourth sword, it doesn't do proper damage, so it'll do the damage of the first sword, I believe. And because it does a rollover, it does too much damage, so it under rolls. And then also, if you attack Mothula and it bounces into one of the many spikes in the room, if an enemy encounters a spike, it doesn't do damage. So even though you just attacked it, it didn't touch a spike, so the game is telling it you don't take any damage, so it doesn't take any damage from your attack. Fuck that boss.
That boss fight sucked, and I went into it like I was outside, like ready for it, and I just kind of happened to get lucky, just randomly doing shit and got it first try.
Yeah, the GBA version fixed
probably gave me the most trouble. As far as soundtrack, it's an excellent soundtrack by Koji Kondo. The sound effects are also very well done.
Right.
It's actually one of the very few game soundtracks I own on vinyl.
Nice.
There's a guy. It's called Switched On. It's this guy that redid the Link to the Past soundtrack on analog synthesizers.
Nice.
And it sounds great. I just kind of bought it on a whim because it was cheap and I like the soundtrack.
Right.
Saturn, tell me about reception and legacy of this game that maybe people liked. We don't know.
Yeah. So, according to the late game rankings, the Super NES version averages 92.87% positive reviews, averaging a 9 out of 10. The GBA version was averaging 91.74% positive.
Yeah. I'd say the GBA version is 1% worse than the Super Nintendo version.
Pretty much.
I think that's fair.
The Metacritic ranks the GBA version because Metacritic doesn't acknowledge any games before the year 2000. It gives the GBA version a 95 average. Unfortunately, when Game Rankings merged into Metacritic, they deleted all of the old reviews, so I don't know any more specific than that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But so many of the elements that we talked about that started in Link to the Past have permeated into the rest of the Zelda franchise and the gaming industry in general.
Right.
That it's hard to really say what the game's legacy is because it's pretty much just everything we do today is based on the legacy of Link to the Past.
Right. It really did. There is definitely a distinct design shift in video games.
Oh, yeah.
At this point that I would not completely, because that's ridiculous, but attribute a lot of to Link to the Past.
That's true. I believe we could attribute about 100% of that to
exactly 100%.
Exactly that. No, there was that comic that I mentioned earlier that was it ran in Nintendo Power in the US for 12 months starting in January 92 and told the entire story of Link to the Past.
And it's collected in its own volume. You can buy it on Amazon for like $12 right now. And it's a good comic. It's really, I forget the name of the person that did it, but they're very well-renowned comic artists.
They actually bound it and printed it in the mid-90s too. The current one is a reprint, which is nice that they reprinted it. I'm very happy about that.
They also redid the weird Mario comic run.
I loved that weird Mario comic.
Those are fucking weird.
And then there was also several of the music tracks that Kondo composed for this game have gone on to be mainstays in the Zelda franchise. Notably, I wrote down Zelda's Lullaby, Ganondorf's theme, the Royal Family or Hyrule Castle theme, the Kakariko Village theme, and the Fairy Fountain theme are all ones that I happen to remember off the top of my head carried over to most of the other games in the series. As we briefly mentioned, there was the GBA port. It was slightly modified. Came out on Game Boy Advance in 2002 in North America, 2003 in the rest of the world. And it was bundled with The Legend of Zelda Four Swords, which nobody played because nobody knew somebody else with a link cable.
That's correct. My brother bought a second Game Boy and played it by himself.
Ouch.
I know. Oh yeah, trust me. I was upset.
I have wanted to play Four Sword for almost 2 decades now and have not.
We should play it.
How?
We just need 30 miles of industrial GBA link cable laid along the highway, as we've discussed.
There were some changes to the GBA version, most notably to the Ice Palace. They changed the final rooms in the Ice Palace to make the intended solution more obvious. But
is that because here's the thing, everyone was, when I got to the Ice Palace, I went through it and I was like, that was a hard dungeon, but I don't feel like it was that bad. I feel like I had more trouble in other places.
Yeah, the thing is that
I didn't realize it was improved.
Oh yeah, it was changed pretty drastically. The last several rooms, the last several puzzle rooms anyway, are almost completely redesigned from their Super NES version. On the Super NES version, if you came in with the Cane of Samaria from Misery Mire, you could just skip that puzzle altogether. No matter how annoying or obtuse it was, you could just walk to the end, drop a Samaria block on a switch, and just walk to the boss. Yeah. But on the GBA version, they fixed that so that you still have to go through the entire intended puzzle to even do that. So by then you've solved the puzzle the intended way, so you don't need to do that anyway. So
Right.
There are some people who prefer the GBA version because of that, because it's less obtuse to get to the correct answer. They're also
I prefer it just because I prefer the GBA, but I don't know that I'd say it's the superior version. GBA also makes Link scream every time you swing his sword.
Yeah.
Which is annoying.
Yes.
And the controls are weird because there's 2 less buttons.
Yeah, there are 2 less buttons.
You also see less of the screen at any
Right.
given point. It's a little more zoomed in, but I honestly don't really notice that.
I actually just replayed that one too for this episode. I played through the entire GBA game again. And my biggest complaint about it is the controls.
Which I imagine is largely... I'll tell you this, because you've got many years of Super Nintendo muscle memory. Right. I played the GBA version, then I was like, well, I should play some of the Super Nintendo version, and I could not get used to the Super Nintendo controls.
See, my thing is, it's not just Super Nintendo, it's also NES, because on the NES, A was always your sword. And on Super NES, the equivalent button is B, because they shifted them from Mario World. So B was always your sword. And then on the Game Boy Link to the Past, it was the B button, which would be the equivalent of Y on the Super NES, which just drove me insane to have my sword on the left and my item on the right. And I went back and looked at it, and Link's Awakening also does that. The very first time you get your sword, it puts it on the B button. But on Link's Awakening, you can change it anytime.
You
so it doesn't matter. But Link to the Past was the first game that hard-coded it to the wrong button, and it pissed me off.
Wrong is a strong word, Saturn.
Oh, it's wrong. It's very wrong. It's just as wrong as Mega Man Anniversary Collection on the GameCube.
Okay, well that one is objectively wrong, but that's weird. That's different.
No, it's the same. So obviously the Super NES version is also available on Virtual Console, on Wii U, 3DS. It's also on Super NES Classic. It's on Nintendo Switch Online. There was the game that was intended to be the remake and ended up being the sequel, which is Link Between Worlds, which is known in Japan as Triforce of the Gods 2, to make it as obvious as possible that it is a sequel. It was on 3DS in 2013, and it shares a similar overworld with similar theming and music, but all the dungeons are completely different, all the puzzles are different, all the items are different. So,
are the bosses different?
Most of them, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
For basically since Link Between Worlds came out to pretty much now, I've maintained that it's the superior game.
Yeah. It's a good game. I don't know if I'm ready to call it superior.
The more I think about why that was the case, the more I'm reminded at my Zelda 1 versus Link to the Past comparisons, where Zelda 1 was more open and free, and there weren't necessarily right answers all the time.
Right.
Link Between Worlds brings that freedom to the Link to the Past formula, because you can just go rent items willy-nilly and just kind of do things in whatever order you want. And I think that specifically is why I liked Link Between Worlds so much more than Link to the Past, because Link to the Past, again, as we said, for very obvious reasons, demanded the correct answers.
Well,
and Link Between Worlds is kind of okay
advised to the
fudging
correct answers.
Yeah,
because
Link Between Worlds was more okay with you kind of fudging it or brute forcing it, or maybe you didn't figure it out and you just found a way around it. And that's, it played into that,
right?
I think.
Now, one thing that a lot of people I've seen fault Link to the Past for is when they talk about the linearity, they talk about how all the dungeons have to be completed in order, unlike the first game where you could just go in whatever order you wanted. But once you get to the Dark World and you finish that first Dark World dungeon, most of the dungeons can then be taken on. And a lot of people don't realize that just because they aren't familiar enough with the game to go directly to them.
Also because the game numbers them, so it kind of encourages you to do them in, the idea is you do them in the numerical order.
Well, the first game numbered them as well, but there was no incentive to do them in that order.
Yeah, right. I mean, you got in there. I feel like the first game, you didn't see the numbers till you walked in the door.
That's true.
And then you're like, okay, well, I'm here. I'll see what I can do.
Unless you had the map that came with the game, they would tell you.
Right, but we're not all 9,000 years old with these ancient relics that have been uncovered from old civilizations.
My Sumerian Zelda map.
Fuck, they didn't even reprint it when they made the NES Classic hardcover.
That's so
the
depressing.
bastards. As far as recommendations, I know you recommend the Super Nintendo version. I think if I was recommending the game to someone, I'd probably also recommend the Super Nintendo version. I personally like the GBA version, but there are, I don't even really want to call them issues, but a few minor changes that make it a little more annoying to play. And since there are so many ways to play the Super Nintendo version, there's no reason not to play that version.
My biggest complaint about the GBA version is that there's always that quest in the Lumberjack's house that I can never touch because I can't play fucking Four Sword.
Yeah. As far as final thoughts, it kind of goes without saying that A Link to the Past is a masterclass in video game design that everyone should try to experience because, again, it is so prevalent now. It might not be your favorite Zelda, and I know for sure it's not mine.
Because you're wrong.
But it's definitely a shining example of graphics, music, gameplay, and level design all coalescing into a great overall package. And while I know I've lodged complaints against it during this episode, none of them, aside from maybe the heart piece complaint, none of them, I would say, are dings against it. It's just me saying this might not be my preference.
And I would like to say that you're wrong because it is the best game in the franchise, but that's okay. We accept wrongies here sometimes.
Yeah, we do accept wrongies around here if our Discord is any indicator. So yeah, it absolutely, if you've not played Link to the Past, give it a go. Again, it might not be your favorite. You might prefer a different Zelda. You may not prefer this one.
Right.
But there's no denying that it is a masterfully crafted game that was a watershed moment in video games that we are still feeling the ramifications of.
Just seeing
today.
where some of those mechanics and ideas and gameplay design structures came from is it's nice. It's nice to see where some of that got its roots.
For sure. So yeah, that's Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. That's everything everyone could possibly say on it.
But
ever.
wait, we have someone else here who can say more about it.
But wait, there's more. So do stay tuned after the ending theme. Our producer Guy is going to come on because I think he cited this, I believe, and he will correct me if I'm incorrect. I believe he cited Link to the Past as his favorite game, literally of all time, that has ever existed in the human history.
Nice.
So he wants to come on and tell me
both how wrong
I
we
am,
are.
Probably, yeah. So yeah, as he and Saturn form a coalition against wrongies.
We will
In the after credits segment. Anyway, thank you for listening. If you'd like to support the show, then we would like you to support the show at patreon.com/Retro Warriors, where you can get spin-off shows like Talking Wizards and early access to uncut episodes that include us talking about weird Namco bubble memory
Konami.
Arcade machines.
It's
Konami?
Yes.
Whatever. It's basically the same. It's both red letters.
How dare you?
It's the same. You can also rate and review us on preferably iTunes, because I don't use iTunes, but it is very much still the mecca for podcast reviews, and a lot of podcasts live and die by iTunes reviews, even if they never see them, because I have to install iTunes to see them.
Yeah.
And I don't want to install iTunes. But it would mean a lot to us. Or if you rate and reviewed us on your podcast aggregator of choice, or even better than that, just tell a friend about the show. There is no algorithm that drives podcasts.
Nope.
It is all word of mouth and
But
reviews.
you can see or listen to the podcast on YouTube now, which is controlled by an algorithm.
We are also on YouTube, and that is algorithm controlled, which means it will never point you to it.
Nope.
So go search for
Never,
it.
ever,
It's on there.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for listening. Again, stay tuned after the ending theme here for our producer, Guy.
For even more Zelda talk.
For even more Zelda. So thank you, and as always,
Let us
cling together. And we're back. Guy, are you there?
I am here.
Oh, good.
Excellent. We're
so worried that
the
you were
way-
going to be disgusted by Justin's words that you would have left and never come back.
No,
The way Saturn
he was
said, "Oh,
absolutely
good."
correct. It is my favorite game that has ever existed in human history.
Yeah.
I don't know about
Even better than Ball in a Cup?
non-human.
Yeah, what about pre-human history? How do you feel about the video games from that particular era?
I don't know what kind of video games pre-humans had exactly.
Right. But they were good ones.
They were definitely better than Link to the Past, you guys.
I mean, look, the fossil record represents about like 1% of the animals. Like most animals didn't fossilize. So
Right.
So for all we know, they had Super Nintendos. We don't know. We don't
Exactly.
know.
Exactly.
So, Guy, what do you think about Link to the Past?
I just said what I think about Link to the Past.
Okay, great. Thanks for coming and being on.
Bye.
We'll see.
What do you have to correct us on?
Well, okay. First off, I didn't make any correction notes.
Hey,
Thank
that's
you.
good.
Excellent.
Like, except that I did write down Konamco. Because Konami and Namco
Oh, now we're
are
just
the
going to
same
combine
thing.
them to make Saturn extra angry.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to do. Perfect. Well, Guy, maybe you can tell us about your first impressions with Link to the Past, because that is such a... I do... Like Saturn said, he was in that like 8 to 12-year-old range when Link to the Past came out. I was outside of it, well, under it specifically. And I do feel like for people that encountered the game around that age, I don't know that I've met someone who was playing games when Link to the Past came out and was in that age range and does not cite it as, if not one of their favorite games, then one of the best games.
Yeah. The first time that I had seen it was at a daycare, to be honest with you. They had a Super Nintendo there, and one of the kids had brought his copy. And I don't know, it was Zelda, but it was better. Like, what can you say?
Yeah, I distinctly remember seeing the pictures in magazines and being like, oh, thank God it's not Zelda 2 again.
Right?
I loved Zelda 2.
I mean-
I still love Zelda 2.
I didn't see pictures in magazines per se, but whatever.
The-
But
I mean, because I wasn't around. I mean, I was around, but I was not cognizant for the launch of the game. So for me, the first 3 Zeldas were always just these 3 games that we already owned all 3 of them. You know, there was no delineation. There was no anticipation for Link to the Past ever. I just always had it.
It's so weird.
I guess. I don't know. I didn't have anticipation for it necessarily. Oh, I guess I did, because I didn't know that it was coming out, right? I wasn't paying attention to game media back in the day. I'm not Saturn.
Right.
Right.
Right. I was a kid.
Saturn, who was born 40 with a newspaper.
Yes.
Right. So, but I seen it at daycare, and then I remember this very vividly. In my birthday party, like that coming year, I opened the presents, and I'm one of the people that likes to open the small presents first and save the bigger one for last, right?
Right.
Oh, annoying.
Right. So I opened this thing. So I opened the present, and the only thing that I saw on it was like the Super Nintendo like logo.
Nice.
I was like, oh my God, what the fuck? I like lost my shit. My dad got mad at me because he wasn't ready with the camera yet. I was like, okay, well, cool.
Dad fail.
And then I finished opening it, and it was A Link to the Past, and it's the first game. It's the first present that I opened from that birthday party. It's the game that I wanted the most. Everything about it was amazing. And then I got home and just never stopped playing it.
Nice. What negative memories do you have of the game?
Yeah, I would be interested to see, because I know Saturn, likes to be hyperbolic about the game, and we like to joke and have a good time. But as I was playing the game and specifically writing down criticisms I wanted to bring up, because as much as it is, again, a masterclass of game design, I have my criticisms of it, and Saturn's admitted that he has his criticisms of it. I'm interested to see what criticisms you would levy against Link to the Past.
Well, back to your one criticism about heart pieces. I enjoy the heart
multiple
piece
criticisms.
I enjoy the hunt, and I enjoy the little puzzles to collect them. What I don't enjoy is that 3 out of every 4 don't really give you anything.
There's no payoff.
I far preferred the way the Zelda 1 did it, in which you would just get a full heart container when you found them, versus the individual heart pieces. That's just always been my preference, though.
It definitely feels more tangible. It's more exciting.
Yeah.
Although obviously there would be, significantly less hunting if that was the case, I suppose.
Or you could just have a
trade-off.
shit ton of health at the end.
That's true. You could just have like 5 fucking rows of hearts all the way
Great.
down the
I'd
screen.
have been
Well, I
fine with
remember
that.
when like Ocarina of Time came out, and it was okay. Is it going to be full hearts or is it going to be heart pieces?
Right.
And they went heart pieces, and then we knew,
Yeah. Now, Link's Awakening did heart pieces too, and it was already an established thing by that point. And Ocarina did each one was 1/5 of a heart, didn't it?
Was it?
I don't
I don't
remember.
think it was 5 pieces.
I thought it was
I haven't
5
played Ocarina.
from Ocarina on.
I haven't played Ocarina since it came out on 3DS, which was also the first time I played through the game in its entirety.
Brr.
But you do bring up an interesting point, which is how Link to the Past set expectations for the next Zelda, because we talk about how Link to the Past happened, then all of a sudden it set all of the Zelda tropes in motion. But again, it's the third out of 3 games that are pretty disparate. It's very similar to the first one, but I would say in some ways still very disparate from both of the previous games. Do you remember what the anticipation coming into Ocarina and maybe Link's Awakening felt like, as far as like you saying that, or they're going to keep the heart piece thing, and we don't know? It never would have even occurred to me, but that's a totally logical thing to be questioning in that time period, is which of these tropes are going to stick and which ones aren't, because so far we still have a pretty limited number of them.
The prologue quest sort of thing that they have set up, like the pendants, for example, right?
Yeah.
In the Ocarina of Time, you had the young Link portion, and then the game opens up with the traveling back and forth through time, and all
Right.
that. But the young Link portion serves as like the light world analog to A Link to the Past.
Very much so, yeah.
So that kind of established that, and it still does that to this day.
Yeah. Just about all of them have had something similar to that until Breath of the Wild, obviously.
Right.
Right.
And Breath of the Wild. Speaking of Breath of the Wild, right? So you were playing it on stream, or not Breath of the Wild. You were playing Link to the Past.
Yeah.
The other day, and it came out that I hadn't beaten Breath of the Wild yet, and everybody started calling me a fake
Because
Zelda
what have you been
fan.
doing for 3 years?
Right? So to earn some credibility, I had to finish the game before we recorded this episode, and I managed to
And
do
you
that
did.
today during a lunch break.
You did it.
Nice.
I'll say this.
I was wrong. It is not Ocarina of Time that had them broken into 5 pieces. That was Twilight Princess. That was
I
1/5
don't
of a
remember
heart.
that game much. So finishing Breath of the Wild means that the only mainline games I haven't finished now are Skyward Sword and Oracle of Ages.
You're fine.
Mm-hmm.
You can skip those.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, you can. Yeah, go right ahead and skip those. That's totally fine. I have a lot of hate in my heart for Skyward Sword. Just I swell with hatred when I think
I
about
enjoyed
that game.
Skyward Sword enough to finish it once, and I
If they
doubt
will-
I'll ever touch it again.
If they will remake it without motion controls, I'll play it.
Yeah.
Motion controls were literally the least complaint that I had of the entire thing. It was my smallest gripe.
I do agree with
that
Justin's
travesty.
complaint that every time you reload your save file, it instructs you what literally every single item is again.
Yeah.
That is obnoxious. And I'm glad the Breath of the Wild did not do that.
Untenable.
Yeah, that is pretty terrible. I don't know. I guess as far as criticisms of the of A Link to the Past,
Or maybe not criticisms, but just portions of it that
Even
aren't your favorite.
Even like beyond criticisms, like what negative memories do you have? Like things that frustrated you during an older playthrough, or times when you just found yourself not enjoying a certain puzzle or moment or segment of the game.
The fucking Skull Woods boss, Mothula or whatever the hell.
Fuck Mothula.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's a terrible fight.
Right.
I'm so glad I looked out on that stupid fight. I walked in that room and I was like, what the fuck? And I just happened to make it.
Yeah, they did make it much easier on GBA, which thank God for that, because fuck that
Yeah.
fight.
The random heart pieces are annoying to me. Like the treasure chest game where you can only open two chests.
Oh yeah, and the digging game
and the digging game. Yeah.
Oh, what's the third one? I don't even remember. But yeah, fuck those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a third one, isn't it?
thought there was.
There's the chest opening game. There's the digging game where you have to get them randomly.
Right.
What's the third one?
I thought there was a third one where it's random, and it's not coming to mind now.
I don't know. Couldn't tell you.
I don't know.
I-
Those didn't bother me so much because I liked the games. You know, like I liked playing the mini game a lot. My only regret is that it wasn't a fishing mini game.
Well, I guess like
the worst.
the treasure hunt one specifically, you know, it's 30 seconds or whatever it is, and then you're going to do it a random number of times. So
Right.
as somebody who's beating it multiple times in a row or whatever,
Yeah.
having to sit there and know that I could be wasting an hour and a half just digging holes. Is
Fortunately, the in the randomizer they have set it up so that in the chest mini game it is always one of the first two that you open, and in the digging mini game it's always one of the first 30 things that you dig up. So
nice.
in the 30 seconds you have, as long as you dig once every second, you will get it every time.
I'll say this about the shovel. Growing up, the shovel was my 100% favorite item, more so than any other item in the
And
game.
you get it for like 3 seconds before you trade it in for a flute.
Because it fascinated me that I could just dig up random items. I spent hours and hours and hours just digging up random parts of the overworld and cutting grass. It was just I loved it.
That's why you like Harvest Moon and Animal Crossing so much.
That's why, yeah, finally a game that rewards me for my weird behavior.
The first time I played through the game, I don't remember if I beat it without getting the boomerang or I didn't get the boomerang till way, way late. But I remember, like, in the room before the boomerang, you kill a guy, you get a key, and then you open the door, right?
Right, yeah, in the dungeon.
I didn't realize that you unlocked a door. And so somewhere before that, there was a place where you got a key, and I didn't realize that you had unlocked the door. And so I thought that the keys unlocked the treasure chest. And I was like, well, shit, I don't have a key. I can't open that chest. And I left the room.
Nice. You know, also at the very beginning of the game, that very first chest in Link's house is the lamp. But if you skip it, then the very first chest inside of Hyrule Castle is the lamp. And if you skip that too, then the chest sitting next to Zelda in her cell is a lamp, and she won't let you leave the room until you get it.
Well, I mean, that's just smart.
Yes, it was very nice of her.
My first
Excellent.
note in my list of notes, though, is Sahasrara is the sound you make when the pizza's too hot.
That is true. That is true. That's how they came up with that name.
We are I think the word obscene is most correct. We are obscenely over on time.
What?
All right. Well, okay.
You don't
two
want
more
2
things.
hours?
So
episodes?
yeah. No, I was gonna say if we could go through your last bullet points, not to hurry you,
Right.
but
Yeah. So the Ocarina of Time made Link to the Past retroactively better for me.
I agree.
I think I was about maybe it was the second or third stage when it dawned on teenage guy. Oh, hey, this is the story they were telling you about in A Link to the Past.
Right.
yeah.
And I think being able to play through the story that you had only heard of, to that point, was a neat touch for the follow up.
See, for me, it made A Link to the Past better because of how much I didn't care for Ocarina of Time. And also, I was so upset at the story of Ocarina of Time because they had told me before A Link to the Past came out, and I want to say it's in the manual too, that this is the story of Link and Zelda and how they met for the very first time, and this is the first story of all of Hyrule. This is the first time that Link ever encounters Zelda or a Triforce ever in the history of ever. And then Ocarina of Time comes out, and it's like, no, this is before that.
They not only said that, but then not only went against it in the very next game, but have continued to go backward in most mainline Zelda games. It feels like,
it's just like, no, this is the origin story. No, forget that one. Now this is the origin story, and it's driving me insane.
Yeah.
Oh, back to Breath of the Wild real quick.
Yeah.
So I bet since I beat it, I've been playing through a new game, like going through to like 100% or whatever, right?
Right.
With a guide.
Yeah.
I now have more seeds than I did my entire first playthrough.
Yeah, I think I ended up with less than 100 my first playthrough.
I ended up with more than that, but it wasn't near that. What is it, 900?
900 total.
Yesterday I looked at it and I had 12.
Yeah, I think I had like 60 or 70. I had gotten every single shrine, but I was not finding Koroks.
No, I had like 2 extra melee weapon spots, 1 extra bow, and 1 extra shield slot.
Right, that sounds about right.
Jesus.
Okay, did you have one final bullet point?
Oh, I did. My favorite part about the swords is that every time you upgrade, it gets a lower register on the swing, and so it makes the sword sound heavier.
Oh yeah, it sounds badass.
I never realized that.
However, the sword beam for when you're at full health is always the same strength as your very first sword, which pisses me off.
Yeah, it was just a neat little like sound design element that all 4 swords have a different swing.
Right.
I never realized that, but I was also listening to it on a Game Boy Advance SP speaker. So
good. The best quality sound.
Well,
I don't know how the fidelity is on that.
Now you just have to play through it all again with headphones. Clearly.
Perfect. I can't get used to even with headphones, the all Game Boys, I don't know if you know this, don't have great sound output. It's not great.
Play it on SNES online.
But if you play it on Game Boy with headphones, then you can just keep hearing them go,
Yeah, it's awful. I'm too indoctrinated into the Game Boy Advance control scheme. I can't switch to the Super Nintendo. It screws me up every time.
Just
this
play it
is
on
also
somewhere you
the
can
reason
map your
I'm a
controls.
right-handed batter in baseball. I should be left-handed, but no, that's not how they teach PE in Texas.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
true.
Guy, thanks for coming and being on the show. I'm glad we could have you on while we talked about your favorite game of all time, at least in human history. Fossil record dependent. We're still not sure.
Right.
Science hasn't caught up.
Well,
but we think
someday when we
your
unearth
favorite
the
game
first Final Fantasy.
they just called it fantasy back then. That's all it was called.
No. It was called Initial Fantasy.
Anyway, Guy, thanks for being on. Everyone, thanks for listening at home, and we'll see you next week. Good night.
Bye.